Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Robert passed along to me a story of another council someplace considering legislation that won't pass muster if it ever makes it into law. We talked recently about the people in Wisconsin who wanted to make it illegal to not print things exactly as they said, and the council actually thought better of that and didn't pass that law as they suggested. But here's another crazy one. This one's out of New York. The Associated Press has a story. You could end up being behind bars if you annoy a police officer in an upstate New York county. And this almost sounds like an Onion story or something, but it's not. Albany, New York. People who annoy an officer in one upstate New York county could find themselves facing jail time under a measure recently approved by a county legislature. Under the Monroe County proposal, a person who annoys, alarms, or threatens the personal safety of an officer could be punished with up to a year behind bars and up to a $5,000 fine. But you'll notice there's three things there: annoys, alarms, or threatens. And, you might say, well, they shouldn't be allowed to threaten somebody. Well, yeah, that makes sense. And to alarm a police officer, does it mean like to scare them or frighten them? But to annoy them? I'm worried about that because, number one, how do you define that? But number two, some people have got a very, very low threshold of annoyance. There are people out there who shouldn't be cops, but Jamie Anthony, chief of staff of the Monroe County Legislature Majority Office, said county lawmakers passed the measure on Tuesday in a 17-10 vote. 17 out of 27 liked this. The county executive will hold a public hearing on the legislation and decide whether to approve it later on. The legislation also applies to first responders. And again, I have no problem with the law that says you can't threaten a first responder. I have no problem with the law that says you can't alarm a first responder, depending on exactly how that plays out. But to simply annoy a first responder? And by the way, does that mean if I'm at a McDonald's and there's a paramedic at the next table and I'm doing something that annoys them while they're eating their lunch, is that a crime? Should it be a crime? It seems crazy to me. Some, of course, have called the measure unconstitutional, which is pretty much everyone who's seen it except for those 17 people who don't get it. The New York Civil Liberties Union said it will have a chilling effect on complaints against police. They said it also concerned over what the legislation could mean for communities of color. Members of the community have every right to challenge police officers, particularly those that engage in unnecessary behavior. At a time when more accountability of police departments is needed, this law makes us incredibly backward, or takes us incredibly backward. So, that's going to be the concern, is the chilling effect this will have on people who want to complain about the police. In a statement last month, County Legislator Kara Halstead said she was proud to support legislation that looks after those who look out for us. Sounds like a politician, just saying stuff that sounds good. This local law aims to crack down on behaviors of disrespect and incivility toward law enforcement and first responders in the hopes that these smaller incidents do not escalate, she said in a statement. So, disrespect and incivility. Again, you can't make me respect you. You can't make me be civil to you. You can't make me love you. I'm sorry. I threw in the last one. I think it's in a song somewhere. It's in a bunch of songs. But the point is that there are some things in this world you can't legislate, okay? There's things out there that will annoy everyone, But you pass laws to force people to be polite, to be civil, to be respectful. I wish everyone was respectful. There's things that I do out of respect for people. And the idea that there are people out there who are disrespectful. But I'm an old school guy, A news release on the legislation also gave mention to people being dousing uniformed New York Police Department officers with water. Well, there's already a law against that. You can't dump water on somebody. Not if they don't want you to. So there's already a law against that. Why do you need to pass more laws when the ones you already have in the books actually are there? Dolores Jones Brown, a professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, said courts have found that the use of the words annoying or alarming in a statute are overbroad and unconstitutionally vague. And that's another problem. If you pass a law and you say we're going to outlaw certain things, okay? They'll often define what's being outlawed and they'll give all the different definitions so you know what you're getting at. So, like for instance, when they tell you have to drive, have a driver's license to drive an automobile on the roads of America, the statutes in each state will say what an automobile is, what a road is, and so on. And so it lets you know these things. And then the question comes along, what about flying a kite? Well, a kite's not a motor vehicle, And so when you say you can't annoy somebody, how do you define annoy? Okay. You say you can't be disrespectful. How do you define respectful or disrespectful? And alarm, So it's a problem. But the legislation, the professor said, could create a situation where people are scared to exercise their First Amendment rights. An officer could be annoyed by a person who asks them their badge number or who records them with a cell phone while on the job. We've talked about this. That may or may not be illegal, depending on what state you're in, a few other things. But the point simply is this, that how do you define annoyance? She said this statute definitely has a capacity to make people afraid to do that, referring to just simply exercising their rights. She also said that a portion of the measure could survive a legal challenge. That's a section tied to conduct that threatens the personal safety of a police officer. And I agree with that. That's what I said. The most extreme, if you take those three words and put them on a spectrum, okay, and you say annoy, alarm, or threaten, okay, over here is the severity max, right? Threatening somebody, I can see that being illegal, okay? But to annoy somebody, I'm not even sure how you define alarm. I know people out there who are scared of their own shadow. They hear a loud noise and they freak out, So, do we go off that or, So, she says that the section tied to conduct that threatens the personal safety of a police officer could survive a judicial, review. But courts have found threats easier to define, but they're not completely beyond interpretation. Under the legislation, a prosecutor would have to prove that it was a person's intent to threaten an officer's personal safety with that one. But again, how do you define annoy? You have annoyed a police officer. You should go to jail for a year. This is insanity. So, again, it was passed by the Monroe County legislature, and I'm not exactly sure, how that works. I'm assuming that there's a body that passes it, and then there's an executive who signs it, and that becomes the statute, the law, whatever you call the code of the municipality. But it would become law in that county, I guess, Monroe County. And so if you live in Monroe County, you might want to stand up and talk about this. In particular, there's going to be public hearings on the legislation. And I certainly hope that people show up in force to talk there, because it might be the last chance you have to criticize the police. It's just crazy. So, again, Robert, thanks for passing this along. But again, I suspect that if this law gets passed as it is currently worded, it won't survive going up on appeal should somebody actually be arrested and convicted of annoying an EMT, for instance, a paramedic or something. And like I said, you need to have all kinds of distinctions in there. Obviously, if a paramedic is at the side of the road trying to save someone's life, and you get up there and start tweaking them on their ears and jumping around, making faces at them and making weird sounds and squirting with a squirt gun or something, that's not annoying them. At that point, you are interfering with their job. Okay? So if I was asked, Steve, how would you fix this? We want to get the same result, but fix it. You'd say, oh, you can't take action that interferes with their ability to do their job. Okay? But the way this is drafted, if I'm driving along and there's a guy in an ambulance next to me and he won't let me get over, and I indicate to him somehow manually, using my hands, that I'm unhappy with the way he's driving, he could call his buddy, call one of his buddies the cops and have me arrested for annoying a first responder, and I could wind up in jail for a year for that. And that's absurd, and it would not stand up on appeal. But one of the things that people have to remember is I've had people say, Steve, what's the problem with passing unconstitutional laws? Because the court will just overturn them somewhere down the road. Yeah, they'll get overturned somewhere down the road, but meanwhile, they're on the books. And being on the books will scare people. But also, just to get it overturned can cost money. And there are people out there who can't afford to take something up to the Supreme Court. We've already pointed out in a previous video how expensive that can be. Millions of dollars to take something up to the Supreme Court. And so I've seen lower court judges make bad rulings. And I've seen a judge make a dumb ruling in a district court, appeal it to a circuit court, another dumb ruling, and then up to the Court of Appeals where it gets overturned. And meanwhile, that's 3 times in court to get one correct ruling, and all the money and time that got wasted here. None of this is fast. Legislation is slow. I always tell people to use the word glacially when describing the speed at which courts operate. They operate glacially slow or glacially slowly. If you want to use two adverbs. So there you go, my friends. You could end up being behind bars if you annoy a police officer in an upstate New York county should this law get passed. There you go. Questions or comments? Put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Lehto's Law. And no, I'm not a robot.